Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford, and for the next hour or so, give or take, we're going to be talking about all things comics, comic-based related, and strangely enough, a lot having to do with AI and intellectual property rights and worker strikes. So there's so much news this week. We will get into it in just a moment. Anyway, welcome, everyone. Wrench mentions in the house, Mr. Greg Heck. Let's see here. We got Fred Slota as first up in the chat. Jet City Comics from the Pacific Northwest. Great to see you. Richard Scott. Hey, welcome. And Larry's Library, who is getting some love in the chat as well for doing his YouTube efforts. Mike Beam and Ed Billiot. Nice to see you. Oro from Minneapolis. And looks like that everyone's catching a break on the weather day. I gotta say, it's hot as hell in this office here. So as soon as you see sweat streaming down my face during the show, it's just because it's the highest part of the house and the AC just does not do its thing here. But anyway, Tim, welcome. And yeah, let's get into it. All right, so first of all, a brief bit of comic-based news before we get into the other goings-on in the world. We are underway with the new edition of ComicBase. It's going to be codenamed Archangel, and more on that in the weeks that follow. We'll be setting up a private development and testing group for anyone who wants to be involved with the very early stages of development on that, probably in a couple 3 weeks. We got some heavy lifting behind the scenes that we need to do just to, it's almost like when the construction crew knocks out the walls of your kitchen or something before a remodel. We need to do that stuff before we let anyone else in, because it's not suitable for human inhabitation at the moment, just because there's so much that's just in chaos on the back end to support the new version. But once that's done, we'll be inviting folks to want to get in on the early testing part of that. We'll be inviting folks into our Slack group who are interested. So look for the call in a couple 3 weeks on that one, but we're not quite ready for you just yet. All right, let's see what else is going on. Free Comic Book Day coming up this Saturday, and it is going to be epic. There are 48, count them, 48 official Free Comic Book Day books, and the racks behind me, on my desk, are absolutely full of free comic book stuff. I think this is the record. I don't think I've ever seen this many books coming out for a Free Comic Book Day thing. All the major publishers that you would expect are involved there. Marvel, DC, each putting out a couple, 3 books each. Archie, Fish Flies. I mean, I'm looking at the list, and it's everyone you've ever heard of is pretty much got something, at least one book in the whole thing, including places like Sony are doing books. So go around to your local comic book store, show them some love this Saturday, and I'm sure they will appreciate it, and they will undoubtedly load you up with goodies. So give that a go. All right, now, so on the bad news of the world, IDW, also known as Idea Plus Design Works, and they're also the publishers not only of books under their own brand IDW, but also Top Shelf. They've been delisted from the New York Stock Exchange. They cut 39% of their workforce, which includes all of their marketing, all of their PR, and half of their editorial. So they're not out of the game yet, so they still have some things going on. They're not chapter 11, but they're definitely they're definitely on the mat. CEO Alan Grafman will be replaced by Davide Jonas, who is the son of the IDW chairman Howard Jonas. Take that for whatever it's worth. I don't have any feelings on the personalities involved. In general, I'm of the opinion that anyone who's trying to put out good products, I wish them all the best. And IDW has certainly in their time, they put out a few clunkers, everyone has, but they've also put out some really nice stuff. And I hope they manage to pull it together, and at least the better properties that were under IDW, I hope they find a home if it's not IDW. Jetsy Comics points out DC and Marvel need to clean house too. I think everyone's looking for the St. Valentine's Day massacre, especially over at DC, to happen. What purging that I've seen go on has been very quiet, but I think everyone's waiting for something similar to happen, on some extent, over in those two publisher houses, because the financials are not great in either place. Anyway, but like I say, IDW, I wish you the best. Okay, so other things that are interesting, and I just came across this one recently as I was looking for some, doing some show prep on the whole thing. You guys might know of a service called Chegg. They help people with homework. They do tutoring. They're basically a service to, if you don't have an older brother in the house to help your kid who's struggling in math, they are that service for you. Or the folks who are there to help your kid with their difficult courses. Their CEO gave a talk just to investors on, I believe, Monday. And he said, "Yeah, look, we're really worried about ChatGPT, and it seems like it's really affecting our ability to sign up new users on the whole thing." And due to just that talk, Chegg lost 48% of their value overnight. It bounced up a bit since then. Let me see if I can find the stock graph on that one, because it's a stock graph you never want to see in any property that you're involved with. Oh, man, I'm sorry. This is one of those ones where I've got too many windows open, and so I can't pull it up easily. But yeah, the stock was just hovering along at 18, and just it literally looked like a cliff face, straight down. So yeah, the context on that one really is, do I need Chat GPT to help me with my homework if I can literally, I mean, do I need, do I need to pay a service if I can just, ask Chat GPT for the answer? And for a great many students, apparently, they feel the answer is no, I can just do that. Chegg, interestingly, is coming up with their own implementation of Chat GPT, which they're calling, wait for it, Cheggmate. Yeah, the jokes write themselves at that point, and they still don't have an announced rollout date for that one. But it's also really unclear to anyone else how you would capitalize on that. We're going to be talking more about AI as things go on, but that was an interesting little data point. All right, let's get on to the major stuff we want to hit today, and that is the Writers Guild of America strike. Now, any of you guys who've been around for more than a few years probably remember the 2008, I guess it was 2007 into 2008 Writers Guild strike, which, it shook the world up pretty good. They were on strike for 100 days. It's not the very longest strike that's ever happened, but it was long enough to, absolutely abort many shows that were starting to get their legs under them. It put basically all of TV into reruns for several months, and canceled a lot of things. Among other things that we saw, if you guys remember the show Heroes, it was starting to have some great momentum going into season 2, and that just they lost 11 episodes out of that one. By the time it came back for season 3, it was a wreck. Breaking Bad and both lost some episodes. The thing that I think it's going to be most remembered for is that it really was the pivotal moment where reality TV absolutely, it went from being a couple of shows, like Survivor or The Real World or things like that, to just becoming like the dominant thing that was on television. And it especially during the writer strike, because reality TV show, they're not really reality, as we all know, but what it officially is unscripted. And because during the writer strike, you couldn't produce anything that didn't have a script, that involved, hiring someone to, send in a script. You had the producers of Lost and things like that. The writers were literally just at midnight, they're required to hit send on whatever they had, and that became whatever the episode was. And you need to fix it on set. At that point, you couldn't have a writer do it. So it really disrupted the industry pretty big. Now, in 2008, I'm going to say the writers had a pretty solid case for worry. They were at the time mostly exercised about they called it new media rights, which is to say streaming and DVD and so forth. Because when Apple would go and sell an episode of Lost at the iTunes store for $2 or whatever it was, was it Damon Lindelof or was the writer on that one? He didn't get a dime out of the whole thing, and they did successfully manage to get the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, I believe is the correct acronym. They did get them to roll over and add in residuals off of these new medium things to the bottom line of all the shows. On the other hand, it did come at a pretty good cost to everyone involved. I believe it was estimated that it sucked some hundreds of millions of dollars out of the local LA economy. It's not the most expensive strike of all time, but it was very expensive. I mean, because when the show closes down, you also lose the makeup artist, the set carpenter, everyone else is also out of a job during that time, and it shut the world down as far as Hollywood went, during the course of the whole thing. It did kind of prep the way for the newer world of today in terms of how shows get distributed and paid for. It was moving away from a model before where you either, you sold things on VHS, to the local rental store. There was a royalty stream involved with that. You would, sell deep, increase, you would put them on broadcast TV. And a typical check for someone who like wrote a network show, anytime your show aired on network TV, you'd get a check for like 20 grand. So, I mean, you could make some pretty good, money as a writer back then. But at the same time, the check you got for when that same show streamed, someone was recounting, it's like, yeah, my first show I worked on, 20 grand for the royalty check. When it streamed, I got $4. It's like, okay, you got a point there as a writer. I mean, I think you have a legitimate beef, and I'm glad they were able to work something out on that one. This time out, it's the deal is weird and complicated. So the thing that they're striking over in particular is a thing they call it the MBA. It's the minimum basic agreement, which is the least you're allowed to pay any Hollywood, Writers Guild writer to be on your show. And the things they're asking for this time, I mean, some of it's hard to be very sympathetic to if you're not in the business. I mean, and if you are, I think your sympathies are going to be very much aligned with where you sit. So, for instance, if you're a producer trying to get a show made, you're, probably sitting there going, "Now these guys are bleeding us dry. All you're doing is raising our costs. You don't know how hard it is to do what we're doing." And honestly, putting together any TV or film project is a minor miracle. I'm always stunned that they managed to put the elements together and make them happen at all. So, anything that challenges that, I get being defensive as hell about. On the other hand, if you're a writer, I'm sure you're sitting there going, "Hey, man, we're getting screwed in this new world. We're not keeping up with expenses. We're not getting, when these guys make new money off of streaming off in foreign markets or in other things like that, we don't get paid. We want more." So, I mean, I think if you sympathize with the writers, typically you're going to take the writer side, on these kind of financial issues. If you sympathize with trying to get shows made, and just producing the things, you'll probably, sympathize with the producers. But honestly, at that point, you're really just arguing about slices of the pie. I'm not overly concerned about the money issues, because I think there hasn't been a person alive that didn't want more than they had. I mean, that's the most common viewpoint of all humanity is, yes, I think I'm not being recognized to the extent that my talents, deserve. I would like more money. Every employee has always felt that way. But anyway, the interesting things on this one, I think, are going to be the some of the ancillary parts of this one. Oh, and by the way, I did want to say something before about what the effect of the previous writer strike was. So I had like kind of a short list here. So of course, the number one thing that everyone knows is like the absolute rise of reality TV, which absolutely broke out. There are some things that were in issue of the 2008 strike which didn't get resolved, which were actually pretty interesting issues. So, for instance, there's still ambiguity about what union represents animators. So, if you're working on the new animated, He-Man or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series, there's still fighting about exactly where the lines are as to whether you're represented by the WGA or the oh God, I forget the name of the guild, that the animators guild, and the rest of the whole thing. That one is still up in the air, and that's one of the issues that at the end of the 2008 strike, they said, you know what, it's not worth fighting about anymore. Let's just end the strike. So that one still got left where it was, and honestly, I don't think it's been picked up for this round out. But I think one of the good things that came out of the writer strike last time out is, if you guys remember Joss Whedon from Buffy the Vampire Slayer fame, he had suddenly found himself with a great deal of time on his hands. And so if you have not seen it yet, what he did to keep busy during the last writer strike is he created something called the Dr. Horrible Sing-Along blog, using Neil Patrick Harris in the title character as Dr. Horrible. He was a supervillain, and he did it as a musical. Released on the internet, shot the entire thing for about $200,000, which was mostly in the form of IOUs to the actors and set designers and everyone involved, which he eventually managed to pay back out of the $3 million or so that he realized out of selling it on DVD and various other platforms when it finally came out. But yeah, absolutely delightful. It's about 40 minutes long, the whole thing. If you haven't seen it before, absolutely pick it up on DVD. And I understand there's actually kind of a meta thing about the making of it done in the form of a musical itself, which I believe is called Commentary or something like that, the musical. It's something I'm going to have to pick up. It also became a comic book at the end of the day. So yeah, definitely Dr. Horrible sing-along blog, absolutely the thing I would recommend is a good thing out of the last one. All right, so let's talk about some of the interesting side issues of this one. And I'm going to go to the WGA page on this one. This is their negotiation status as of May 1st, 2023. I'm going to kind of skip over some of the things. They're just money. Because like I say, who you sympathize with, I think is going to be almost entirely based on where you work or where where the people you relate to in the industry are. You're arguing over slices of a pie, so I don't feel like there's a moral issue involved with just the money part, other than everyone would like to keep what what they think of as theirs. So anyway, WGA is looking for they want basically the total spend on everything when you put the price tag on the whole package together. They're looking for about 500 million in extra money out of the Producers Guild over the term of the contract. They're being offered about 89 million, I believe, is the number in the initial offer. So they want minimums up and down the line to go up, for everything, including the residuals. They're being offered half or less than they're being asked for. Notice that the money, by the way, this part here isn't where the real money is. The real money comes in some of these other things down the line. So for streaming features, the Writers Guild and all the Hollywood guilds have different rules depending on how big your production is. So it's possible, if you have a very, very small budget, I mean, very like micro, I think they're called micro productions, very, very small, it is still possible to pay a day rate and hire, union employees for your production. But, of course, it'll run your costs up, but you get access to a higher talent pool. Because you use union employees, you're eligible for certain awards and certain schemes to, raise the profile of your production and so forth like that. But they know that you can't bleed, I mean, as much as they try, you can't get money out of a stone. So for the very, very small guys, they don't try very hard to figure out what how to get the money out of them. But as your budgets go up, they get more rock ribbed about wanting to demand it. And of course, they want to move the levels, at which point the higher terms kick in. They want to move those down all the time. So they have a thing called high budgets streaming video on demand. They want to currently it's a program with 96 plus minutes, and I believe it's a $40 million or above budget for a streaming show. That's considered high budget right now. The WGA wants to move that level down to 12 million, irrespective of how long it is. And they also want it to, anything over that, they want it to be treated as if it was a full theatrical production, which means they really get paid. So they want, it's called a guaranteed second step, which is a payment event. They want that if you're hired for a screenplay that has less than 250% of the minimum. So unless you're really, really getting overpaid to make your feature to start with, they want to add in more payments to it. They want the ability to get weekly pay out of the whole thing, where it's every week you get 50% up front before you've even done the work for the week, and then you get paid out over the course of the writing period in the week. And they want that applied to writers, all through the whole thing. These are just kind of like work quality of life rules for them. The union, on the other representing the producers, or I guess that's the alliance, not technically a union, is saying, yeah, no, that would absolutely, wreck what we're doing here. They want to move streamings from minimums for streaming. They want there to be guarantees at a very small 13-week guarantee. So if you even start working on the whole thing, they want to have a 13-week guarantee the whole thing. The Alliance of Producers obviously not loving it so much. Here's where I think the terms get a lot harder to justify in economic terms. So, for instance, they call it preserving the writer's room. So, pre-greenlight room. So, this is you're putting together the concept for your show. It hasn't been picked up by anyone. You're basically doing it on spec. They want a minimum staff of 6 writers, including 4 writer producers who get paid at a higher rate. They want that involved with anybody. So if I, Pete Bickford, had an idea for a comedy special and I want to pitch it to HBO or something like that, they'd be like, "No, that's great, Pete. You wrote all the jokes, you set all the characters up yourself, the whole thing. That's nice. We're still going to have 6 people on set, in your writer's room, which you will be paying for a minimum period of time for the course of this whole thing because it's important that writers work." This is just I don't know. Anytime you enforce a staffing level like this, and they also want to ramp up the staffing level. So if it's meant to be a 6 episode if it's meant to be a 6 episode thing, they want to have, they want to start you at 6 writers, and then every 2 episodes they want to add another writer up to a maximum of 12 writers. So if I'm planning like a 24 episode season or something like that, I'm gonna have 12 people I'm paying for in the room, whether I needed them or not. The Alliance for the producers obviously said, yeah, no. Other things, when you're pre-greenlit, they want the staff guaranteed at least 10 consecutive weeks of work, regardless of how quickly you could get the work done or not. And obviously it's another thing where they said, yeah, no. They want 3 weeks per episode up to a maximum of 52 weeks. They want half the minimum staff employed all the way through the production, and 1 writer must be employed all the way through post-production. God knows why. The whole thing's shot, and yet you still want to pay a writer. These sort of requirements remind me very highly of a friend of mine who used to work for the San Jose Mercury News in the ad department. So there was a Fry's Electronics would lay out all these amazing deals for CD players and Blu-rays, whatever the whole thing was. And basically, this was a guy who was responsible for laying out the whole ad pages throughout the entire thing. But there was a union rule at the San Jose Mercury News. It was I forget who was it McClatchy? But the San Jose Mercury News was a union shop, and he was required to, because laying out of things was not considered an art department job. It was considered a press job. That was the sacred province of the press operator or the press department. So they had an old guy who would sit around in the press room just reading magazines and going outside for smoke breaks all day long. This guy had no role, but every time there was an ad drop for the day, my buddy Tony had to go and run the whole thing past this grizzled old guy who sat around doing absolutely nothing and get his initial on it, because basically what it would be then is, under union rules, then the union guy had agreed to it over in the the appropriate department. So even though he did no work, he got to have this really cush job. Well, my buddy sweated his ass off. Those things, I gotta say, these kind of union rules are the things that make people who aren't in unions hate unions. All they are, they're literally dead weight cost on your business, and they make you less competitive. And eventually, business conditions tighten, and at a certain point, you can't haul the dead weight around. And so, if these guys aren't contributing to the bottom line, eventually they get jettisoned. But it's a long time getting them done. In the meantime, everyone's just resentful about the whole process. So these sorts of things where, like, your stat, it might be a good idea to have a dozen writers working on your show, but it's hard for people who aren't in unions to say, yeah, that's something that we're definitely going to do regardless of whether we needed them or not. Comments so far. Steve Dazzler, it wasn't quite all reruns and shutdowns. The forgettable reboot of Mission Impossible reused 4 scripts from the original series. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you definitely got things out of the vaults. There were prior to the previous writer strike, you would basically, any script that was half finished, that you could have a guy who's the showrunner finish up or do things like that. They definitely tried to shove as much stuff in the pipeline as they could. Another thing that was interesting is, like, the late night comedy guys, because they need new material that's topical every night. They were some of the first people to say, like David Letterman and people like that, said, "Look, man, I'll pay you the writers out of my own pocket. I will cut my own side deal, with you guys, just because I got to keep my writers going, because I can't shut down my show. He's not writing all his own jokes." All right, so let's see here. Dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-dibba-doo. Okay, hey, Pete Cratchit, hello from Boston. All right, cool. All right, so back to things. Going back to their conditions here. Okay, so they basically want to, bump all the writers and writer producers up, quite a bit more than the other side wants. But again, not super, concerned about that one. They want, yes, they want their weekly pre-greenlight room weekly service paid at 25% premium. So in other words, we're working on a new show. It hasn't been picked up by anyone, and most pilots go nowhere. Most of them are a dead weight loss, and they would like to make that dead weight loss 25%, higher. The other side's offering, "Oh, dude, we'll give you 5% because, again, the dream of a writer is work on a show like Big Bang Theory, where it's going to run for a million seasons. You're going to get paid a bajillion dollars per episode, and then it's going to go into syndication. At that point, you're pretty much set for life if that happens to you. And you spend your entire career trying to get that gig. So what they're saying is, hey, look, when these things aren't going to ever get put into production, they want essentially hazard pay. Make of that what you will. They want to yeah, they want they want minimum basic agreement weekly minimums during post production, which again, I don't even know why there's a writer there, but maybe someone does. Um, Very heavy bumps they're looking for foreign streaming proposals. Uh, the I mean, it's hard to characterize it. It's basically they're looking for about 3 to 4 times what they're getting now off of foreign streaming, including some amazing residual bonus rates. If you have more than 75 million people in foreign countries watching your content somehow, they want 150% of your former base on that one, per episode. So that one's quite an interesting thing. Um, let's see, they want the viewership based streaming residual. So in other words, they don't want the streaming to be based just entirely on the fact that you ran the episode again. They want it to be a payout based on how many people watched the stream, regardless of whether it's a paid stream or not. And the studios don't want any part of this one because, among other things, they don't want to give up their streaming numbers on that level because you would have to say how many people are watching any given episode of everything, and that would of course become public knowledge very quickly. And that becomes grist for the infamous Hollywood accounting, but it would be absolutely mandatory because if you're getting paid per eyeball or per streaming device on the whole thing, you need that number. Let's see here. They want different things for the ad-supported free streaming. We'll talk about FAST, free ad-supported television, in a bit because it's one of the major driving forces from the other end of things. It's the thing that's causing all the TV producers right now to sweat bullets over the fact that they're just not making the money off of their streaming services they did beforehand, and they're trying to figure out how to, sell enough ads and into a block to make the whole thing still work for them. And then here's where it gets really interesting. I'm not really worried about the pension health so much. They'll figure it out. Artificial intelligence. The Writers Guild is demanding that regulate the use of artificial intelligence on MBA covered projects. AI can't write or rewrite literary material. It can't be used as source material, and MBA covered material can't be used to train AI. So, in other words, you're not going to allow it to look over all the scripts that you've seen before to come up with something new. You can't let it suggest story ideas. You can't let it do any of these things. And the other side is saying basically like, AI's here. It's not a thing that you can get rid of easily. It's going to be part of the world somehow. We'll offer you seminars on how to cope with it, but it's a tool. It's out in the world now. It's not something you can control to that level. And beyond that, there's a number of things they agreed on to, various raises and caps and spans and things like that for the whole thing. That part's not so off. And what they're saying right now, WGA is projecting it's about 429 million per year additional cost. I've seen numbers that were a little higher than that. This is WGA's number. The producers are saying that their offer is about 86 million, so they're off by about a factor of 5, give or take. So I think they're going to be at this for a while. So the sides are quite a bit far apart from each other on this whole thing. Now to get into some interesting aspects where I think this whole thing is going to with the whole thing. So just for fun, before the show, I asked ChatGPT. Oh yeah, here's the graph I was looking for on Chegg. So this is the 5-day graph of Chegg, the homework assisting company. And let's see if I can move it up. Up, come on, oh, come on back. Whoa, I did not mean to move myself onto my own screen. All right, let's try that again. All right, here we go. Oh, bugger. I could learn how to use a mouse. I really can. Come on. Check. Boy, when you have a lot of tabs open, um, it's really hard to, if you don't have empty space in your thing, it's really hard to maximize window. All right, so here's the Chegg graph here. Obviously the baseline is down here around $12, but man, that's not a good look. So yeah, if you own Chegg stock, hope it evens out for you. This is the dead cat bounce they caught, the day after, but wow, that's the 1 month chart on that one. So that's no fun. All right, so just for fun, I asked ChatGPT, all right, so let's imagine a writer's strike here. Can you write me a new episode of Seinfeld? And let me see if I can find the tab that has the result. And oh my God, so many tabs. Oh yes, here we are. Okay. And it's funny because the thing sounded really familiar, and so I actually had to cross-reference it with the list of Seinfeld episodes to see if it was reusing an idea, and it kind of was, sort of not. Um, Gosh, where are we at? That's the library. Oh yeah, here we are. Okay, so I gave ChatGPT this prompt: write me a synopsis for a new episode of Seinfeld. And I close that tab over here. And this is what it came back with. And it did it in however many minutes. That made things worse. Let's do it like this. Okay. Um, Let me close this other window because it's confusing the hell out of me. Okay. Title: The Library Fine. Uh, and I'm going to say ChatGPT wrote this entire thing in about 90 seconds. Jerry and Elaine go to the library to return some books, but Jerry realizes he had a book checked out for over a year and owes a huge fine. Elaine mocks him for being such a procrastinator, but Jerry insists he never received a notice about the overdue book. Meanwhile, Kramer's obsessed with finding a rare book that he read about in an old library catalog. He enlists George's help to find it, and the two embark on a wild goose chase across the city, visiting various libraries and bookstores. Back at the library, Jerry tries to negotiate with the librarian to reduce his fine, but she refuses to budge. Desperate, Jerry turns to Newman, who works at the post office, to help him find the missing notice. Newman agrees to help, but only if Jerry helps him with a favor first. As Jerry and Newman work to track down the notice, they discover that he was mistakenly delivered to Kramer's apartment. When they confront Kramer, he insists he never saw the notice. He had no idea about the overdue book. Meanwhile, George finally tracks down the rare book, but accidentally spills coffee on it, ruining its value. In the end, Jerry pays off his fine, but not before the librarian makes him swear to never let a book go overdue again. Kramer and Newman reconcile over their mutual love of books, while George laments his ruined opportunity for a big payday. Um, Boy, I gotta say, that wasn't half bad. Um, oh, and, yeah, sorry, that was just me dramatically reading the whole thing. Um, you can say, it's a Married with Children premise. It's I actually thought I seem to remember there was an episode in Seinfeld about, him, not paying a book, and they had the guy who was kinda like Joe Friday tracking him down to, get, the library fine guy. Other than the idea it involved a library fine, the two are not, dissimilar at all. But honestly, I gotta say it's a perfectly plausible synopsis for a Seinfeld episode written in 90 seconds. If you said, ChatGPT, give me a new episode of Friends, it would do something similar. Yeah, and you could say like, I didn't like that one. Try it again, and 90 seconds later, you'll have another set of ideas. This, I don't know how you say it. This is really going to change things. And I said I wasn't able to see the other comment on the Chegg thing. Darn it! Sorry about that, guys. I will see if I can get that chart up later on. I'm not having a great time, making my windows play with my switcher very easily right now. So, bear with me. I'm doing what I can. Let me see here. Did I close? I think I might have even closed it off now. Nope. Here's the Chegg stock. Let me switch it over to, there it goes. There's the Chegg stock price, and that's the month-long curve on this one. Let me see if I can get the bottom of it to show. And right there at the bottom is the little dead cat bounce. So yeah, not cool, guys. All right, so let's talk about implications about all this stuff, because this is, I I'm going to stand by the idea that, some people say, like this is just, this is just the complaining of people who, when the horseless carriage came out, all the buggy whip manufacturers and carriage makers and, people would, sweep the street down, and get the horse poop off. They were all like, oh, well, of course things change. It's all for the good, and people will adjust. Don't worry about it. There'll be just as many new jobs created as there are taken away. I don't know, man. I gotta say, I'm unsettled how fast AI is making certain things change. I don't think we're gonna have anything like the amount of time required to deal with this in any kind of graceful way. I think it's gonna be disruptive in the extreme. Now, when the dust settles, are we gonna be in a better place or a worse place? I can't say, but I think the disruption is gonna be intense, and it's gonna hit more people who really thought of themselves as protected, that are just not gonna see it coming. I mean, there were when automated, cashier lanes, started appearing in your grocery store, you say, "Yeah, look, bagging groceries is not that much fun anyway. Let the people do it themselves. They can be in and out of the store faster. And besides, it's just a cashier shop. Who cares? And then during COVID and things like that, suddenly, your local McDonald's. I mean, good luck walking in there and ordering a cheeseburger and actually, not dealing with a machine to get it. uh, you know, initially you start out with a whole bunch of people who used to take your order, who would then, get it, turn it into a cheeseburger and hand it to you. Those guys are now currently sitting around while you play around with the McDonald's terminal, wondering, what the hell? How do I use this damn thing? Why can't I just talk to one of the three people at the front who are sitting around talking to each other and place my order that way as opposed to dealing with this damn kiosk? At least that's my experience the last two times I've done it. And the last thing made me think, why am I doing a McDonald's to start with? But the thing that's going to happen after that is just going to be that those three guys who are sitting there, to hand you your order to, or whatever they're doing right now, they're just not going to be employed after this. You'll have one of them. You will not have three. Same thing goes with, like, if I need to, have a, was it a GPRS, was it GPRC, the data protection thing that all the Euro websites do. If I have something like that where I need to say, yeah, crank me out a, a data protection agreement, the data privacy and whatever else, do that for my, the ComicBase website. You know, ChatGPT can crank that sucker out, basically stealing from everyone else's agreement, which was, if you don't have a lawyer, that's probably what you're doing anyway. But it's going to crank something for you in a minute or two. At that point, you can pay a lawyer, an actual lawyer, like 1 hour's time to review it, make some notes or some markup on it if you want. But you're not going to have hired the paralegals that would have done that work, before. Really, what happens is you hired the $300 an hour lawyer to draft all the whole thing, and he in turn, build it out through his paralegals at $300 an hour while he, did 15 minutes of review at the end. But that paralegal is not going to be part of your charging scheme anymore. Uh, Richard, some interesting comments about the McDonald's touchscreens. Let's see. Oh yes, and as I did point out earlier, which I didn't show, the graph does it's the y-axis on the Chegg graph is at 9. It's not at 0, so it's not the fairest graph of all time. But if you want to pull way back on the whole thing to get like a larger graph on the whole thing, it's still that's not a bump you want to see in your stock at any point. And we'll see if they come back from it. All right, so going back to that, let's see here. So yeah, I think. Oh, another interesting data point on this one. Some people have started rolling AI out into customer service, not just in the form of the chatbots, but just basically what they do is they would record, all the customer service transcripts that went through this particular company, and they basically say, okay, when customers call with this sort of problem, and what they would now do is they'd have kind of like the winning answer, and they would basically put the winning answer to this kind of problem. They'd automatically detect what kind of problem the customer is having, and just give the person who's answering the phone a script which says, well, it sounds like you have a problem with blah, and here are the ways that you can make blah better. And they would read off the script, which was culled from the winning answers of previous chat transcripts. Very basic use of the whole thing. And apparently, it's this place that they were talking about that has implemented this in the last several months, increased decreased the call time significantly, increased the operator productivity, which is another way of saying the same thing, which is to say I can get the customer taken care of and off my phone you know, easier, and I don't need to hire as many tech support staff. But I think very quickly they're gonna realize, "Why did I need the guy to answer the phone? Why couldn't I just, I could call him and say, 'Hi, this is Bob, your virtual assistant. How can I help you with your thing?'" And you describe your problem and say Bob will say, "Well, I think the problem is blah," and instead of paying a guy to read the script out to the whole thing, Bob, the virtual assistant, would read the script out to you if you wanted. You certainly can do this already with chat, bots, but you might prefer a human voice to do it, at least to start with. And if Bob says, "Oh my goodness, I don't seem to be able to solve your problem for you here, let me escalate your issue to a level 2 tech," and that'll be the first time you actually talk to a human at that point. At that point, I think what you're going to start seeing is this sort of work gets rolled out further into the world. Is I think just a lot of people with these kind of like white collar, but still largely clerical jobs are suddenly going to realize that the companies don't need nearly as many of them as they needed before. You'll still need some. There'll still be a role for some high end on this one, but man, oh man, I think the disruption is going to be epic. So we'll see where that goes. I think the big lesson I'd put down for this whole thing, and this is where I kind of tied into the Writers Guild agreement, is first of all, I think yes, there's lots of ancillary people are going to be out of work as these issues work their way through Hollywood and frankly every other industry. Um, there are people, when you do a strike, what you're really doing is you're taking away a service unless you get your way. That's the whole point of a strike. Is say, like, I'm not, none of us will work for you anymore unless you give in to our terms. And by doing it all together, what you're hoping to do is hoping to, to tell your paymaster at that point that, well, you need us so much that, you're going to give us what we want. You really can't do without us. But the other actor in that whole thing is the viewing audience, because that's ultimately the customer for the whole thing. I mean, the producer doesn't need you if the producer isn't getting paid. I mean, they're not going to produce product that they can't sell. Same thing is if there is no audience for what they're doing, there's no pay there either. One thing the strike does is it shuts everything down and you forces this discussion to happen and to find out what happens if we take the product away entirely. And I think the answer, based on previous experience with writer strikes and also some more global types of removal of the things in our lives, I think the most obvious one is the lockdowns that happened during COVID, is you're going to discover very rapidly what people can do without. And one thing that we discovered during the previous writer strike is, well, turns out, yeah, I prefer scripted television, but I'll watch if I'm just looking to veg out at the end of the day. I'll watch an unscripted episode of some, Survivor or some cooking show or whatever, what have you, Ice Road Truckers. You know, it might not be my favorite thing. I might really prefer to be watching a new episode of Breaking Bad or Heroes, but yeah, it kills the time. It's good enough. And you'll discover that, a fair amount of your audience will put up without it. Some people won't, but you'll be starting to be able to put a number on what that's worth to you. I think the really bracing one that happened to everyone during COVID is we all discovered that, yeah, as much as we like going to work for some of us, or and certainly our employers liked us being at work physically, if you force people to work from home or get educated from home or things like that, you might not like the results, but you'll do it. And as a result, now 3 years after the lockdowns, commercial real estate is in the worst place I've ever seen it in my life. San Francisco used to have like a 2 or 3%, free rate, and it was like 97% occupancy. I believe the current number is more like 26 or 27% unused occupancy, and falling. They also just announced a closure of 2 Nordstrom stores. I just caught the news thing just moments before the broadcast here. People are getting out of big cities like that. They've fallen down there. When I went back on my trip to Vegas, I took a side trip to meet up with some of my staff out in California, and yeah, to describe the real estate situation in what used to be this bustling downtown. I mean, I saw it every day of my life. I'd go up the street to have coffee, you do all these rituals of your workday. It was like they dropped a neutron bomb in First or Second Street in San Jose. there weren't even bums out on the street until you reached 3 or 4 blocks away from what used to be the center of town. All the old real estate, there used to be cranes everywhere building it. Yeah, all the buildings are done now, but now they all have for lease signs at the bottom. And our old building at 95 South Market Street, the used to be the ComicBase World headquarters. That whole building is now largely empty. So, and that's a year after people kissed were allowed to come back to work. Driving back to the airport, you used to see all these company names on buildings that whenever it was one of the coolest things about being in Silicon Valley is like, oh my god, there's the Apple campus, there's Intel, there's Facebook, there's you name it. Even when you're just driving to the airport, it's like, oh, there's Vodafone. It's like the guys who have your your conference telephone that would be on your conference table. You drive past there now, you see the shadows where the letters used to be, for all these buildings. The big company name, you can still make out what the company name used to be, but the building itself is empty now. So yeah, it's watch. I think everyone is definitely worried about what things can people, if you're forced to take the product away, what will we discover we can live without? And I think that's the part where everyone will be, in a war of nerves with this current writer's strike. Um, what else can we say? Yeah, the only other major points I have on this one is you can't keep an above market price for anything unless you have a monopoly. So, what writers are trying to say in this one is we'd like to be paid more money. We'd like to be paid more than we're being paid now, whatever we think our current market price is. But they're hoping by acting as a union, they can essentially inflict a monopoly. In other words, you're not allowed to hire a non-union person, to replace me. You're not allowed to use an AI. You're not allowed to use, any of these other things. They're trying to keep the shop locked. As a result, they're trying to keep their monopoly. But monopolies are meant to crumble and to be violated. It's just, if you do manage to keep the integrity of your monopoly straight, yeah, you can force terms within it, but you're always at risk from the independent production that's ramping up across the street. You're always at risk between the guy who, hey, look, I don't need you as a writer. I'm an auteur. I write, I direct, I do the whole works. I do it all myself. I don't need anyone else. Those guys are rare, but they do exist. And if you're face off against one of those guys, you can't always push the monopoly all the way. Monopolies were meant to crumble. And finally, I'm going to say there are going to be some defections to professional to comics and other fields like that. We saw it with Joss Whedon. When you're not allowed to write for television and you still write, and that's how you pay your bills. You're going to write for whoever pays you to write. So you will see folks. You will see probably some heavy hitters find their way into comic books in the next few months if this thing drags on. And that can be good. It's a good source of new talent into the field. I'm always happy to see that one. I think if you are an independent person right now, whether it's an independent film production or you're an independent writer, you're not bound by the union rules. I think there's going to be a lot of interest in your content as long as the strike goes on. So, if you've got a hot storyline, if you've got a great script going on that you think you can turn into a production on your own, there's a lot of out of work folks there. Now's your time to strike with this one. Go ahead and do the Dr. Horrible thing if you've got it in you, because you're definitely got people's eyes on you. The longer the strike goes on, the more that you will have your chance to make your mark. But I'd say finally, AI is coming for everyone, and never forget whatever you think your worth is in the market, the real minimum wage on everything is always zero. There's always the chance of, can I just do without you? And I always tell people, here at ComicBase, whenever you get hired, it's like I said, look, guys, I'm hiring you for your brains. If this is a tech company. If we could have a robot do your job, a robot would already be doing your job. So I need you for your creativity and your brains and all the things that I can't hire a robot to do, because man, oh man, we move mountains with a few people over here, but we have probably 4 times the number of computers as we have people. What the scope of what robots are going to be able to do is increasing rapidly, and I think we all better stay limber on our feet and get ready to move in whatever direction the world needs us to move in terms to stay relevant, because this kind of old-fashioned, we're just going to pull up the moat, and and we'll just guarantee that even though all our competitors are using new tools and all our competitors are using lightweight productions and skirting union rules and doing things like that, if that's the competitive environment you're in, man, it's really, really hard to keep the moat up, and keep the walls up to keep your thing stuck in a guild system where even though you're working with some guys who very talented and they work really hard to get where they're going, man, it's a brutal world out there, and you're always competing against a guy who's working without those limits. So, if that guy has a chance to take you down, he will. So, I'd say my basic advice to anyone involved with all this stuff is keep your skills up, keep limber. All right. I'm going to short sell this next topic just a bit here. Yeah, Oro says, let's see here. TV will become ubiquitous because no one ever lost a dollar underestimating the intelligence of the American people. You know, maybe. I don't know. I I have so much to say on the economics of this whole thing, but that's gonna have to wait for another thing. And sorry, Fred. Yeah, unfortunately, the graph tool that they're using on CNBC doesn't seem to want to normalize the graph down to 0. So it's let's just note that the graph does not the Chegg graph did not y-axis itself all the way down, no matter what we tried. I'm sure their charting tools is trying to make the most interesting graph you can, given the vertical constraints they've got. Them, they're not trying to do that. So just always read your axes before you make any investment decisions. But it's pretty good at showing movement. It's bad at showing absolute value, and that's what faked graphs are all about. Okay, moving on. And let me also hide the Chiron over there for just a second. The other interesting story, which I think is going to be it's going to have a big effect on the world, and I don't know if we're going to fully grasp the full extent of it for a while. I'm going to apologize. I didn't really read the particulars of this one for it came out at the end of March, but I wasn't hip to the particulars of it until just now. You guys might know about the Internet Archive, which is one of its side offset shoots is a thing called the Wayback Machine, but basically ginormous effort. It's a nonprofit to basically archive all of internet communication. So you can go and visit, what did the ComicBase website look like, 10 years ago, or whatever the thing is. You can always visit all these things. One of their other efforts is they've taken, I think, 3.6 million books, including a hell of a lot that are not that are out of copyright. They've scanned these books. They scan 4,000 new ones per day, and they form this thing they call the Open Library to quote make all the published works of humankind available to everyone in the world. They in this they give out 70,000 ebook borrows per day of generally copyrighted information. So this is problematic if you actually earn your money writing for a living, because it means that someone can buy a copy of your book, put down this whole thing, and every day of the year, someone who did not buy your book can be reading your book for free, and you are not getting paid. So they're not in love with that. They're trying to compare it with the use of books in a library, saying, well, you sell a copy to a library, they loan it out, it's a physical book and so forth. We're just making the process more efficient. Well, they were doing this one, and they had the idea, they call it controlled digital lending. The idea being that, well, we're only going to loan for your copyrighted books. We're going to have a physical copy, and we're only going to loan as many digital copies as we have physical copies of in our collection. And when someone returns one, we just give it on to the next guy and so forth. And so we kind of keep it so that people at least a little bit bought it, so it's a little bit like a real library that way. That was what they did for a number of years, and then COVID came along, and then they said, well, gee, we have a national emergency library. We're going to create this, and we're basically going to say, yeah, all those limits we had about lending books out, where we only as many as we had physical copies. Yeah, it's too important right now. We have to make it so people can still read books. So because no one can get to libraries, we're just going to take all the limits away, and we're going to lend these things out to as many people as want to grab it at any given moment, having bought or in many cases coerced a donation of a single physical book of your whole thing out to as many people as you want. So not surprisingly, Hachette and 3 other publishers went and sued uh, and district court on the whole thing, and they were awarded a judgment on March 26th by Judge John G. Kotel that says, yeah, this whole thing is based on a fantasy. So this whole idea of controlled digital lending and like we're going to buy one book, we'll kind of turn it into an electronic copy. We're not going to pay for an ebook license. We're just going to scan it ourselves and then give out the ebook thing. He basically went down the entire list of the whole thing and said, "Look, nothing in here is even remotely free, fair use. Just like you're not allowed to, buy a copy of an album and then make, copies of tape to give to friends to everyone. You're not allowed to do this. It's not. It's just simply copying. You're not transforming it in any way." The Internet Archive was making the legal argument says, "Well, look at Google Books. Google Books was allowed to keep a database of millions of copyrighted books, which is searchable, and." But under the decision that came, which allowed Google Books to do that, they said, look, it was database searchable. You only can have excerpts from the whole thing. You were explicitly not allowed to have the whole book. And so it's a research tool. It is actually, they call it transformative use of the technology of the whole thing, but it doesn't replace having the actual book. What you guys are doing is actually replacing having the actual book. And furthermore, they even drew on a decision involving a company called Redigit. I believe I have the name right, which interesting. It was back in 2011, I want to say. Very interesting idea of this one where they wanted to make it possible to sell again digital things you had bought. So you buy a $2 or $1.99 song from the iTunes store. This thing would somehow guarantee that the moment it was sold in their marketplace, it was removed from your library in on Apple, so you no longer would have copy access to the whole thing. And in that previous decision, the court ruled that no, you're just making a copy. You're not transforming it in any way. This is not a legal use of the whole thing; is not permitted. And so they held that violated copyright in that case. So the thing will undoubtedly come up for appeal, but the whole doctrine of controlled digital lending, the idea that your local library is likely doing something very similar, where they say, "Look, we have 10 copies of Spare from what's his name, Prince Harry, and we're just going to make it so the second someone is done marking it is read on their Kindle or however we loan them out, that the next guy just gets the next digital copy, and we're going to justify this because we bought 10 physical books somewhere." That whole doctrine, it's an interesting application. It'd be interesting if it was the law, but it exists nowhere in copyright law. It's just it's more of an argument that says, well, it's a little bit like it's called first use doctrine, which is the thing that allows you to sell a book after you're done reading it. So if I buy a comic book and then I read it and I sell it to somebody else, that is it was ruled that the sale under copyright only applies to the first sale of the book. So the sale from the publisher to me, the copyright applies to that one. But if I then take it and sell to someone else, that's allowed under law. But that's different than saying I get to make copies and hand them around. And this has been held in kind of it's almost like an honor system gray area, where the argument was put out there by libraries. Well, hey, this should be it's like lending the book, just without all the moving of books around was what they were doing with their controlled digital lending. And Koldel in the District Court of Manhattan basically said, yeah, no, it's nonsense. That it exists nowhere in law. You're making it up. And so we're not going to allow it. So like I say, this will undoubtedly be appealed because the damages associated with it are undoubtedly large. But we'll see what happens. This could have a very big impact to libraries and to the lending of digital media in different formats. As far as I could tell, being as far as I can about my reading of the whole thing, I think Kodel's right on the law. I think it'd be interesting if copyright law did allow for things like controlled digital lending, but as currently written, it's as far as I can tell, completely made up. So we'll see what happens. And I think that'll be interesting to see what happens. Let's see other comments here. Fred says, wasn't that how a streaming service used to work, playing physical discs? The way, as I understand it, streaming rights are negotiated separately. One of the things that worked against the Internet Archive in this last one was the fact that publishers were offering ebook rights. So, in other words, they said, "Look, we would have sold you the right to have X number of ebook copies in circulation, but you didn't do that. You simply either got or in a very strange way, coerced us to even provide you with the money to offset the purchase of a single copy, which you then loaned out to a million people. Um, you didn't go through the rights process. You just circumvented it and made copies. So that that certainly not covered. Fred says one shady streaming service, not all of them. I mean, like you could try making a streaming service where all you do is you go down to your local Blockbuster cleanout, rip all the Blu-rays onto the whole thing, set up a server, and then offer for streaming. But I gotta think you'd have the copyright guys knocking on your door in about 2 seconds. I did know a guy who had done that with South Park episodes at one point, because I was having a discussion with him about, like, how the hell do you get the bandwidth for that? But he also got visited by the cops in the middle of the night, and he was shut down. So it doesn't really surprise me. Okay, guys. Well, I'm about talked out. That's going to do it for me this time out. I think next time out we'll be doing more of a comic book type thing. There's just so much news in the world right now. I did want to get through it all. Do visit your local comic shop on New Comic Book Day. I think they would definitely appreciate you there. And we'll see you on the next one. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe on the one. And there's also a forum on our forum, special topic for the whole thing, to suggest live stream topics. Please give us ideas, because sometimes there isn't a million bits of news you want to cover. And so definitely we need things that are interesting to you guys that we can talk about. So you guys take care, and I'll see you all on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.